Let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Harvard is acting more entitled than ever. President Trump made the direct and correct decision to defund to the tune of over $2 billion. U.S. taxpayer dollars should never be propping up anti-Semitism.
And that is so true, Elise Stefanik. College crackdown. Trump goes after the cesspool of anti-Semitic, anti-American behavior among faculty and students at the elite institutions, and they are fighting back. Why I believe this could be 47's greatest triumph and why he simply has to win.
Number 2.
China's been selling off treasuries for some time. It's not a brand new development, and for so many decades we haven't had fair market access. So again, we see China taking action, implementing their policy to try to be less tied up with us as well.
And that is true. And China's already made another move this morning, telling Boeing, keep your aircraft, we don't want them. Tariff mania. This has brought to the surface the simmering resentment China has for America and America has for China. They are acting on it too, also stopping rare earth to us. We have the latest, including the deals that are coming in and the exemptions that might be coming out.
Number 1.
And that was an outrageous scene in the White House, and there's a whole lot of lying going on. President Bukele does have the power to release Abrego Garcia. Donald Trump is clearly ignoring a court order.
Yeah, and that they're talking about Bukele is the president of El Salvador, missing the point. Border crossing apprehensions of illegal criminals is happening at such a clip even the most optimistic Trump supporter could not have imagined this much success. And yet the media focuses on MS-13 El Salvadorian illegal sent back to El Salvador. And the case is more breaking news on the illegal front. So first off, this is what everyone's focusing on. I think the El Salvador president comes here, and when he did what we asked him to do, and he cracked down on illegal immigration leaving his country, got rid of and locked up almost every MS-13 person that he could, put them in a maximum security prison. We've all seen the video. And then when they come out and we capture them in the U.S., they worked out a deal for about $6 million. We sent them back to him. One guy from Maryland, they say in 2019, he was a member of MS-13. They weren't going to send him back right away while his case was pending. And then that's the judge at the time. Nothing to do with Trump. So now, whatever had happened, he popped up on the ICE list. They picked him up and sent him back. And they're saying that's the biggest story out there. Look, this is a story. Absolutely. But this is not close to the story when it comes to illegal immigration and border crossings. I mean, I got some numbers for you that you're going to think I made it up. In March of 2024, there were 4,488 people coming across our border per day. In February of 2025, 330. March of 2025, 264. 264, the whole border. Down 20% from last month and 94% from a year ago. And you want to focus on, well, this MS-13 guy who was living in Maryland was not a threat? And who called him a threat? Who said he was MS-13? A judge in 2019. Not Stephen Miller, not Pam Bondi. So I know it's a story. If you picked up an innocent person in a park and you just put him in an El Salvadorian prison, then I think it's a big story. This is a story. And to me, it sounds like this MS-13 guy turned on some of his gangsters, and the judge said, whatever you do, don't send him back to the Gambino crime family because he's already turned on the Gambino crime family. Don't put him back with him. Sammy the Bull turned on John Gotti. You don't put him back with the mob family that he turned on. Okay, I'm not that broken up by it. So when people find that you're an MS-13, do you ever reform from that? Do you take your tattoos off? I don't get it. So that's the big story. You would think some of these things would be a year ago. They said the only way to stop illegal immigration is comprehensive immigration reform. Joe Biden said that's the only thing you can do. You can't stop it. The world is in a migration. The world is migrating collectively. That's what we're told by Mayorkas, who becomes a bigger disaster the more I think about it every day. So the president of El Salvador is here, and that came up. Cut 3.
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just, to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, oh, well, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6th time, so I should be released again. And then we said, well, what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg. And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States, 6 times. He was released 6 times. So these are, you know, like you said, yeah, but there's something broken.
Yeah, do you think that it's okay? That happens in Boston, although there was a big arrest yesterday by a guy accused of incest and molesting other kids. ICE had to go in there, no help from the cops because the mayor doesn't want any help. But Bukele says, listen, this is not my problem. I'm not going to ship him back out. He's in El Salvador. He's born in El Salvador. He goes to your country illegally. You sent him back, and I'm supposed to ship him back? Cut 2.
Suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Okay. So you cover the story. You know what the headlines are everywhere? Maryland man unjustly sent to El Salvador. Now, the Justice Department official said, yeah, we shouldn't have sent him back. They got rid of that Justice Department official. Don't pretend to be a lawyer, but they said there was the wrong message and they didn't make a mistake. Now, the court says you have to make an effort to get him back. They made an effort. They can't decide foreign policy. The Supreme Court said you can't decide foreign policy, but you should make an effort to get him back. They haven't been able to. So every day they're going to have to go and tell the judge at about 4 o'clock today, we tried to get him back. We couldn't get him back. We asked him and he said no. So here's what people should understand. This is totally being spun and it's a distraction. You watch Jon Stewart lead The Daily Show with this story because they don't want to tell the other story. I guess it's not funny enough. They want to talk about tariffs, suddenly make Saturday Night Live. Okay. Can you talk about the crackdown and anti-Semitism on these college campuses? I'm not sure why so many famous Jewish people weren't upset by it outside Bob Kraft, but almost nobody was. You know, I guess Mike Rappaport was another one. But on this guy, Garcia, here's how they spun it. They issued an order stating the lower court, this is what they said. The Supreme Court issued an order stating that the lower court properly requires the government to facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador to ensure that this case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. However, in a warning to the lower court, don't overstep your authority. This is what the Supreme Court said. The higher court also asked the lower court to clarify what it meant when it demanded the government effectuate his return. Garcia is currently being held in El Salvador. It is unclear what impact President Bukele's statements will have on the case. So if you look at the New York Times, they say this. In the Oval Office on Monday, Attorney General Pam Bondi said that 2 counts, an immigration court and an appellate court, had ruled that Mr. Garcia was a member of MS-13. Can we just stop there? That should be in every headline. In 2019, MS-13 gang member Alberto Garcia was taken from his house in 2025 and brought to El Salvador. Now, you might want to know why he should stay, what the danger is to his health, but how can you possibly write this story without saying gang member or MS-13 member as ruled by a judge back in 2019 when Pam Bondi was the Attorney General in Florida? So it goes on to say this. To be clear, Garcia has never been charged, not convicted of being a member of the gang, but during the deportation proceedings, some evidence was introduced that he belonged to MS-13, and the judges decided that was enough to keep him in custody, okay? So a judge decided to keep him in custody. Evidence was produced that says MS-13. That's called a proceeding towards a deportation. The Justice Department submitting, and this is when then they asked again, should we get rid of this guy a couple of days ago? And this is what the Justice Department said. They submitted in filing more than an hour late, echoed many of the recalcitrant remarks that administration officials made in the Oval Office. Yes, that he's a member of MS-13, including the assertion that in 2019, a judge determined that he's a member of MS-13. I don't get it. I just don't understand it. If it was Al-Qaeda, if it was ISIS, you would never say Maryland man. You would say a member of ISIS in Maryland was deported to El Salvador. And if you want to say wrongly, unjustly, illegally, then you do it. But this is a total distraction over the biggest story. Other major stories regarding immigration I think are important. ICE arrested a Brazilian alien charged with incest, aggravated child rape. They had to overcome local authorities to get him. According to a news release, his name is Daniel Garcia. A 57-year-old Cuban national was arrested at his home in Miami. This is another guy taken into custody by ICE and FBI. That's a story you could be covering. How about this? This is kind of interesting. I think in an effort to avoid all these criminal proceedings, at 10 a.m., a hearing on the Department of Justice attempt to drop the case against the alleged top leader of MS-13. Remember we told you about the takedown with Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem and the FBI director present, and they take this guy into custody. And he is Henry Villatoro Santos, allegedly the East Coast leader of MS-13. Now they tell you about all the background. They got him. So to me, they're just sending him back to prison in his country. Why not charge him? You're seeing why not charge him. The minute you start charging these guys, then all of a sudden they got to get their day in court. Then they got to go get their lawyer. And then it's going to take more time. Then you got to house them. They just said, and I talked to the Governor Youngkin last week about this, we're just going to send him out right to a prison in another country. No charges. Get him out. So they're going to try to stop him, Department of Justice, because our own Department of Justice is working against us getting what is now listed as a terrorist organization, MS-13, out of our country. I guess you haven't seen any of the horrible things they did on Long Island, cutting out people's hearts, cutting off limbs and torturing them, cutting off fingers, but that's okay. You just don't feel it, right? We just got to be good to all people. We're a nation of immigrants. We're not a nation of illegal immigrant killers. So I just don't understand a lot of the logic here. When we come back, I'll talk about the latest with the tariffs and the war with China. And the bigger question, as we start to disentangle ourselves from China, why were we not doing this sooner? Why were we not seeing the enemy across the ocean and saying, this is the problem? They've infiltrated our borders. They're buying land around our military installations. They've hacked into almost every computer system. They put students on our campuses to spy on us. They try to interdict our ships in the South China Sea. They harass our allies. What more proof do you need? They steal our intellectual property. They just knock off our patents, and they all get away with it. And then we let them infiltrate us with TikTok and everything else. Finally, we have somebody standing up, and people are crying. This is going to be too painful as we decouple on trade. I think it's necessary. And I say we stick it out until they give up. We do not give in.
The fastest 3 hours in radio. You're with Brian Kilmeade.
What if I was a young student at Columbia, they're on a green card, British, come in, happy to be here, do all my paperwork, get to Columbia, and I start leading a group which is a bunch of white supremacists, and we start terrorizing black students in the way that they were terrorizing Jewish students. Well, hang on. In that circumstance, would we all be as comfortable with this, or is it the reality which was exposed by the mobs at Columbia, which is that for some reason, Jews get treated differently to anybody else when it comes to this kind of thing? Because if that had been, honestly, white supremacists treating black students like that, they would be out the country in 10 minutes.
And it's 100% right. That was with Bill Maher. And that with me right now to talk about this and more, Emily Domenech, Senior Vice President of Boundary Stone Partners, former Senior Advisor to Kevin McCarthy. Your thoughts about what's happening now with this, with focus on these elite institutions?
You know, I think what we're seeing play out, particularly in the letter from Harvard yesterday in response to the Trump administration, is a fundamental misunderstanding of their relationship with the United States government. They feel as though they have an entitlement to U.S. tax dollars, despite having a massive endowment that exists tax-free. And that is simply not the case. They have no guarantee that they should be able to get U.S. tax dollars for research or for funding in any way, shape, or form. That's not something they deserve just on the outright.
So $2.5 billion the president took away yesterday that was going to Harvard because he said, we told you to do a bunch of things to change things and fight anti-Semitism, adopt a merit-based hiring and missions. We're going to oversee that. Prioritize ideological diversity. Didn't say Republican. Reform programs with records of anti-Semitism. Implement a mask ban. Discipline students' involvement in anti-Israel encampments and sit-ins. They're also not happy with the curriculum and the makeup of the faculty. And so they hired Robert Hur from the Her Report, and William A. Burke, who are known as conservative legal attorneys.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're looking to try to make the argument that they're being targeted for, or their free speech is being limited or something along those lines. But I think, you don't have an entitlement to American taxpayer dollars. We're making an investment in your institution. And that means it's a two-way relationship here.
So how about Barack Obama came out and she said Harvard has set an example to other higher institutions in fighting back, rejecting an unlawful and ham-handed attempt to academic freedom. Was he speaking out on the anti-Semitism at his former college of Harvard?
Absolutely not. And I think, again, you know what? Harvard is free to do whatever they want on their campus. But that doesn't mean you get to take taxpayer dollars. And we've actually seen this from conservative institutions, for example. I saw a tweet yesterday from Hillsdale College saying, you know what? There's another path, which means you don't take federal dollars and you can maintain your freedom to do and say whatever you want. So I think it's just a misunderstanding here. You also see these universities pushing back against things like the rate of funding they have to spend on research versus administrative costs. Many of them are suing Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation, saying, "Hey, you can't limit our ability to spend this research grant on our administrative costs," because they're bleeding that money away that's supposed to go to fundamental science research.
And that's that whole overhead breakdown.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
As opposed to the actual research itself.
Exactly.
And now look at the faculty is way too big, the administrators are way too many, and they just up the number of they up the tuition. But Emily, the other thing to look at is who is deciding what international students get in, and should there be a limit on countries investing in colleges? Texas Tech, Qatar, UAE. Why are you so interested in our academic institutions? What are they getting in return?
Right. And I think, we have to go back to this place where it is a privilege to study at a U.S. institution. These are some of the best academic institutions in the world, across the country. It shouldn't be a guarantee that you get to come and go to school here. And we ran into this back when I worked on the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. We spent a lot of time investigating how China was funding students to come to the United States who were part of their 1,000 Talents program, who were bringing our research back to China, bringing our intellectual property back to China, benefiting from U.S. taxpayer dollars doing research and development and partnering at these academic institutions on areas like physics and mathematics and engineering that all have defense applications back in China. So we have to be thinking about the big picture here of what does the U.S. taxpayer fund? Really, really great research, but we need to make sure it's coming back into the U.S. economy.
But the more if this is going to go forward, I want them to expose more and more what you're doing. Okay, how do you hire people? How do you admit people? How much money are you getting from these guys? Do they want the discovery process of this fight? So let's see. So the big, beautiful bill, Kevin McCarthy was in charge of things like this, unwieldy, not easy. This is what James Blair, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, said about where we're at right now. I think Chad said if you have to go 12 steps, we're at between 5 and 7 steps. Cut 35.
I absolutely see a way to a finish line, and you're right. It's not necessarily easy. There's a lot of this to work through, and I think we'll get it done pretty quickly. I think before the summer, early summer, maybe around May or June.
Your thoughts, Emily?
Yeah, I think he's right. Credit to Mike Johnson for being able to muscle this through.
And the president picking up the phone.
Exactly. I mean, I think it all truly comes down to how much influence do the White House and President Trump have over the very conservative, fiscal conservative wing of the party? Because those guys are going to be the ones that's going to be hard to get across the finish line because they have an expectation for spending cuts that the Senate probably can't stomach. We've heard actually some what I find to be crazy things out of some of those guys, like Andy Harris, for example, saying, hey, maybe we need to raise taxes on the richest Americans.
From 37.5 to 39.
Exactly, which I think it would be a absolute travesty for unified Republican government to raise taxes. And we saw, I saw Steve Scalise on TV this morning rejecting that proposal. But that's the kind of things you're hearing from these conservatives because they are so dead set on making sure that they get the spending cuts they were promised. So it's going to be an uphill battle.
Because I think it's legitimate that we got to cut the deficit.
Absolutely.
That's why DOGE, their cuts got to be figured into this, right?
Well, they do. But I will say, we saw the first numbers coming out of DOGE for the rescissions package this morning, and it's around $9 billion, which great start, guys, but we got to do way more than that if we're going to actually tackle our deficits.
I was shocked by how small that number
It's a really small number, and Congress should immediately pass it. $9 billion is not a huge number for the appropriators to swallow, but I think that's a great test to see whether or not they have the juice to really cut spending, because at the end of the day, lots of congressmen talk about wanting to cut spending. None of them want to cut their spending.
But they also don't want to cut Medicare, Social Security, or Medicaid. Medicaid, right?
Right. And those are the big spenders. We have to get into the entitlement space if we're really going to start talking about deficits and debt. But right now, all we're doing is to me, that the DOGE package is the low-hanging fruit. So it should be easy and quick.
Are you fascinated that Joe Biden's going to speak today?
Can people ever
What
just
could he say?
retire? Can we ever get to a point where our politicians retire and go home?
Can I predict that he's going to say Social Security is being taken away?
Of course. He's going to say Republicans want to cut $800 billion from Medicaid, you guys. You should go out and raise money for Democrats.
Is he going to say I could have beat Trump?
Oh, gosh, I hope
He's already
so.
said it once.
I hope so, because it'll make the Dems apoplectic, and that'll be hilarious.
Because they'll be angrier than Trump.
Oh,
Trump's
for sure,
really?
100%.
That would have made sense. Emily Domenech, thanks so much for coming in. David Wells is next. David Wells will bring us inside this Fox Nation special. Did Babe Ruth call a shot? Thanks, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
There's been debates ever since 1932 as to whether or not Ruth called his shot.
You get a room of people and they're all witnesses to an event. They're all going to give you a different interpretation of how that event took place.
The Cub fan perspective was it was all nonsense.
In my opinion, he called the shot and he hit it where he pointed.
That's what made Babe Ruth so special, because he would just talk smack and then back it up.
I want to believe that there was somebody out there who was big enough, bad enough, cocky enough to call his shot and actually make it happen. I don't think there's any event in sport that is more disputed than whether or not Babe Ruth called his shot.
And that's why Fox Nation is doing a special on it. Did Babe Ruth call his shot against the Cubs after getting heckled by the Cubs bench? Did he point over the wall, and did he hit it right there? David Wells loved the Yankees, their history, took great pride in knowing all about it, and that was a great call to put him on this special. 3-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, could probably pitch 9 innings right now. Never hurt, did innings horse. Yes, you can. David, welcome back.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you being here, being with you, and talking some baseball.
You always appreciate the Yankee legacy. I know Don Larson, because you guys were both no-hitters. But when did you start getting attracted to the Yankee background?
As a little kid, just when I first started playing Little League Baseball, you just started reading. Like in school, you always heard about Babe Ruth. And when you're playing baseball, you got to check it out. And back then, no computers. We didn't have anything, so we had to go to the books. And Babe Ruth just stood out to me like a sore thumb. It was pretty cool, what he did for the game of baseball, his lifestyle. It was just like, I want to be that guy. So that's kind of how I, adopted that, and just through my whole career, just started reading up on him and watching everything else.
Yeah, before we, and just talk more about this if we can. So they asked you to do this project about him calling the shot. What is so mythical about it?
It's just because Babe Ruth was so, everyone was infatuated by him. Everything that he did, but for him to do things off the norm, that was Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was what he did back then. Guys wish they would do now, because nobody does anything anymore. But, he had attitude, he had charisma, he had, he talked a lot of smack, because you know what, when you're that great, at that point, people are going to come after you, as you well know. And, but, to me, I think he called the shot, because you see all the videos, you see all the, the pictures and all that, and then all the hoopla going on in the dugout. So he just pointed the bat out there and says, I'm going to hit it there. And he did.
That's pretty amazing. I won't ask what happened if someone called the shot when you were on the mound, how you would feel about that. They said the Yankees, when they got to the game especially, they were hearing it from the fans when they got on the bus. Cut 46.
The Yankees, now with a 2-0 series lead, jumped on a train to Chicago for games 3 and 4. As they arrived at Union Station, they received a hostile welcome, to say the least. Lemons were thrown at ball players. And the Babe and his wife got the worst of it. They were spat on by angry fans. For old-time ball players, I guess this was par for the course.
In the 20s and 30s, it was a rougher game, period. Fighting was not unusual, and Babe Ruth, he took the brunt of things, and he was ready for it. Chicago was a hotbed of baseball, and it was a big game. It really was.
The crowd was huge. There were 50,000 fans there, and Ruth attracted, of course, the most attention.
Right, and of course he got it, and the Yankees end up winning that series. But back then, David, it was just right. You win your division, you go to the World Series, right?
Right.
So that made it quicker, and all of a sudden the two big cities. It must have brought the team closer, though, to take the train. Can you imagine that, being on the train with your teammates for hours?
There would be a lot of fights going on. I guarantee that, just because some guys want to sleep, some guys want to play cards, they want to do their thing, and and I look at it back then, and back in them days, if you're doing, a lot of people smoked. Everybody smoked cigarettes or cigars, and I was never a smoker. I'd have cigars, but from time to time. But that would just annoy the hell out of me, and I would probably entice me to take it out of his mouth, snap it, or then probably end up getting in a fight.
Right. What's so interesting back then? They talk about the players having no power. You remember when Mickey Mantle hit the guy, got the Triple Crown? He basically said, "Okay, you can stay, come back next year." The players had no power back then, but Ruth was like a little like Jack Johnson in boxing. He was bigger than the sport, and famously, when he was asked, how come you're getting paid more than the president? He said, "I had a better year than he did."
Yeah,
so he was really before his time.
He really was. But when you're that, I mean, he was good, but nobody knew what he was capable of doing until a few more years into his career, and then he just blossomed. And when you're that big, you're going to get paid. And a lot of other guys were probably jealous, because you look at guys like Ty Cobb, Cy Young, Walter Johnson, pitchers like that were just incredible. Never even sniffed in the amount of money that Babe Ruth made. But like you said, he was outgoing. Like, I wanted to be, when I was in New York, I went out every night. I just was larger than life, and that was Babe Ruth. And, because I wanted to emulate him at some point, but I had to go do my job. And that guy would go out all night, probably way more than I did, and just produce. And, that's why he got paid. And he did have a better year than president.
He did. So interesting, because he pitched and played for Boston. When the Yankees get him, he just play the field, right?
Yeah, I mean, he won 23 games twice. I never won 23 games. I won 20, once in 19. And to me, he was a two-way player, but, a five-tool player back then, because he could play outfield, he could throw. Obviously, he can, let's say four-tool, because I don't think he could run very good. But, but other than that, the man was just amazing. He was a freak back in the 20s, 19s and 20s. He was a freak.
All right. So, and I want to talk about baseball, but get this on Fox Nation, and it drops. It's available right now today. Did Babe Ruth call his shot? Here's the debate that you'll get here's a sample of the debate you get throughout the show. Cut 47.
I think when you watch the footage, he's going back and forth with the Cubs bench, which had been going on for days, by the way. And if you watch the footage, he's doing this. Yes. Not this, he's doing this. And when he hits the home run, as he's rounding the bases, he's still doing this to the Cubs bench.
Others see the footage a bit differently.
I choose to believe he did. Because at the end of the day, I want to believe in that story. I want to believe that there was somebody out there who was big enough, bad enough, cocky enough to call his shot and actually make it happen. I've watched baseball for 44 years, and I've never seen it done.
Yeah, so that's a little of the debate, and you're a part of it, David, so you're going back in history. Can we talk about baseball today? Are you following it?
Not really. I just, with the games, the analytics of the game, the changes of the game, it's kind of like a turnoff to me. But, I'll, once in a blue moon, I might catch an inning or two. But other than that, I don't really follow it as much anymore. But, I read up on it.
So I'm struck by one thing that I think you can respond to. Ohtani gets almost $1 billion contract.
Right.
What was it, $250,000 against the cap? Who ever heard of that? It's all deferred money. You can't pay for the best player in baseball an all-time record amount and only count a small fraction against the cap that gets you to the luxury tax. I mean, how is that fair that Dodgers did that?
It's, you know what? Well, he deferred a lot of it too. So
that's what I mean.
Well, he freed up a lot of money for the Dodgers, but, and there's still, like Bobby Bonilla, he deferred his money. He's still getting paid. It's probably one of the greatest contracts in the history. And, but for that, when you defer the money, you could do that. And you know what? I think George Steinbrenner probably would have done the same thing, because he wanted to win. He wasn't afraid to spend money.
I don't fault the Dodgers. I fault the league. I fault the league. You got to just say, listen, you could defer a portion, but there's got to be like 2/3 got to count against the cap. Because, I mean, the Pirates might as well be in the Pirates, the A's, these other teams, the Twins. It's almost like they're playing in a different league.
Yeah, but you know what, Brian? It's one guy. So one guy is not going to win you the World Series. He's good. They want to keep him there. It was a lengthy contract, and to me, it's something that it shouldn't happen. I don't think anybody should be paid that kind of money. But God bless him for getting it. Now you're seeing. I think Soto got 700,000 or 700 million. I think it was Mike Trout. What did he get? 400 million or something like that. But so those are the numbers that we could only fathom when we were playing. And when I first came up and I got to the big leagues, I think the most amount, I think Ricky Henderson was making $2 million. George Bell might have been making 1.5. So that was huge back then. When I signed my first $1 million contract, man, I thought I was on top of the world. I thought I was set for life. Nowadays, you're not set for life. You need to have at least, $5 million at least, and be smart with your money to even get it in the sports world, because sports athletes, all across the board, they live a different lifestyle than most people. But if they're not smart with their money, they're gonna be in the dump. And you've seen a lot of players do that. A lot of athletes go down, and you just got to be smart with it. It's like every day, Joe Schmo. You have to be smart with your money to survive.
We only got less than a minute left, but how much do the Yankees push to be win now with the Judge era? He's already 32 years old, 33 years old. How much would you push if you're GM of that team to get the talent to win now?
Well, you have to, and it starts with pitching. Garrett Cole went down. That's a big loss for the Yankees, but for them, the pitching has to be solid because they've got the offense. It just has to gel. 97 to 98, when I was there, we had both ends of it, so we were good.
David Wells, you're always good. Thanks again. Well, let's bring in Mike Rogers now. Mike, welcome back.
Hey, Brian, it's great to be back. I decided to run for the Senate because I know you missed me.
I know. It's been about 2 months. That's a tough loss. I don't blame you for needing to collect yourself because you worked so hard for it. The nomination wasn't easy. That was a tough road. And then you lose to Elise Slotnick by how many votes?
About 19,000 out of 5.6 million votes cast. So 0.3%.
How did she run? What did she say during this time about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? Did she embrace that agenda?
No, she talked about working with Trump.
Yeah.
She talked about how she gets along with everybody, works with everybody. The crazy thing, she went on The View after. This is what drives me crazy about people who really are far left of center, who claim to be moderate, and said anybody that voted for Donald Trump does not have a fully developed brain. Right now, 52% of Michiganders voted against her, right? So with third parties and everything else, I don't know if I would have started there. But, listen, I get it. 32 years, we've had 2 Democrats in those seats, and we just really didn't get a chance to define ourselves very well. But with very little resources and a magnificent ground game, we were able to come within just a whisper of beating. And here's another interesting. I got more Republican votes statewide in Michigan as a statewide Michigan candidate than any other candidate in Michigan history.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
You got really close. So that's why I like Dave McCormick. Dave McCormick barely lost to Oz, who lost to Fetterman. And then he came back and won that Senate seat against an established candidate like Casey. Now you're going to run in an open Senate seat.
Yes. An open seat, great name ID. Actually, despite all their negative advertising, my positives are on the upside. And here's the great thing about this. All we have to do, because we got so many votes in the last election, if we get 85% of the people who have already showed up and voted for Mike Rogers to return to the poll in the midterm, that would be about 51% of the votes for us to win. So, think of that. We don't have to go convert Democrats, although we're going to try. There's a lot of disaffected Democrats. We just need you to go and do this one more time, but you got to show up to vote. And so that's our challenge, but we know who that universe is. We know what issues get them fired up. We think this is, just a really good opportunity to finally put some different thought in one of those Senate seats in Michigan. Their tenure for the last 32 years hasn't been all that great, having 2 Democrats think exactly the same way, talk exactly the same way, and obstruct good things from happening in the same way. At least have somebody in there that has a different opinion on things might be pretty good for the state.
Right. So you had Governor Whitmer say some things. I'm going to work with Donald Trump when I can. Tariffs in principle, I agree with how they're done. We might disagree with. She gave her cell phone number to Trump that if you need anything in Michigan. Is that the attitude the people of Michigan want? They say purple, but do they like when both sides get along or show an interest in each other?
I think they do as a general populace at the end of the day because, our problems are pretty real. And it's not a solid – I don't believe it's a blue state. It is a purple state. And so people are saying, hey, yeah, I want my perspective at the table. I don't mind you working with somebody to get our perspective done. That's the difference in a state like Michigan. And, we've been getting hammered. We've been losing manufacturing year in and year out here. And it's been pretty devastating. Every time a manufacturing job leaves Michigan, that's one middle-class family that doesn't have an opportunity here. I mean, those jobs are really important for the everyday men and women of our state who get up and go to work every day. And so that's why this becomes important. And that's why they're saying, hey, if they can get an agreement and save manufacturing jobs, I'm in.
So right now, Donald Trump says he's considering pausing the auto tariffs as the world economy endures some of the whiplash. And with that, the market's having another good day. Friday was good. Monday was good. Tuesday was good. We're over 40,000 now. So tell me about the challenges of the auto industry, who a lot of these union representatives were behind the president in the Rose Garden April 7th on Liberation Day. How do you view it?
So, listen, I think tariffs as a tool, a targeted tool that are temporary, can be very, very effective. And here's why you have to do it. Think of this. Americans' automobile industry, 80% of engines and drivetrain are produced somewhere else, not in the United States, certainly not in Michigan. That's really not sustainable for a long-term automobile industry. And I'm not talking about just assembly. I'm talking about production of engines and transmissions and all of those things. Is produced somewhere else around the world. And that has to end. And by the way, some of those countries are not treating us very fair on the tariff front. We get higher tariffs than they're charging, and they're trying to keep our products out of their markets. So I believe that we have to do this at some point. I mean, China showed us today, Brian, why this is so important. They decided they were going to the materials to make these magnets. They were going to stop export of these things, which really hurts, military industry, electric cars, all of these things. And they did it because they can, and we put ourselves in a position to let them do that to us. We cannot sustain this. It's not sustainable. If we ever had a major conflict in the world, guess what? Who's building our engines?
No, I hear you. Not only that, it's critical minerals, and they say heavy rare earth metals, rare earth magnets, and they have it. Now, number one, why are we getting our rare earth from China? And they knew that was the card they were going to play. They played it immediately. Then they started, we're not going to buy Boeing aircraft. First off, from off the top of your head, Mike Rogers, do you know where else we could get these rare earth?
Well, here's the good thing. There's lots of places who are friendly that want to participate. But when you can't, it takes 26 years to get a permit to get a mine for some of these materials, let alone process it. So even Australia, they mine it, and guess where they send it to get processed? China, almost 90% of it. And so this is something that is fixable, and we can take it out of the hands of people who have, nuclear missiles pointed at us, candidly, and I think we should, for this very reason. You've now put them in charge of a sliver of our military and defense base, as well as our regular commercial base.
Would you do a Defense Production Act action that would make an emergency like we did with ventilators?
You know what they did that I really liked? The Trump administration did rapid permitting. So if you have it, and based on our national security need, they can go through and rapidly do this. 26 years to get lithium or nickel or even rare earths out of the ground is ridiculous. That's why we're losing. And so, the left took over all of the agencies that go through permitting to allow these things to happen. And by the way, much more environmentally friendly to get it out of the ground here than it is anywhere else in the world. And they wouldn't let them. You can't get it. So all the investment went where people would actually allow mines. So there's a lot of effort now to work with our African friends about getting off agreements. So in other words, if you produce it, we'll buy it. And the other thing China does, this is why we're going to have to get creative on this. You go out and you get a mine of which they know they have cornered the market on whatever fill in the blank material. They just drop the price of the material. So what that does, the private sector goes in and they're dead, right? They can't make it because China has just dropped the price from whatever, $1 a ton to 10 cents a ton. Well, you're losing your fanny. You can't do it. You got to leave. They've done this over and over and over. And they do it because they want to control these rare earths. So my argument is let's put in place these offtake agreements where the U.S. government says, we're going to pay a base floor of this. If you want to sell it in the open market for more, have at it. But when China tries to dump and it hits this price level, we'll buy it. And by the way, we need it. It's not like we're doing something that we don't need. And that way you can at least start pushing back on the Communist Party's ability to fluctuate prices and tank a capitalist way of trying to get stuff out of the ground. I think that's the kind of thing we have to do. And then this rapid permitting that the Trump administration came out with in an executive order is really effective. Now we just need to put all the players around the table and say, we need to get this done. So when you look at the tariffs, and yes, it's hard. I mean, everybody's 401k is getting slapped around. If he can actually bring companies back, which he's doing, investment back, which is happening, and puts everyone on notice. Listen, you're not going to be able to hinder U.S. products being sold in your country anymore. We're just not going to do that anymore. If you're charging us 10%, we're going to charge you 10%. You're charging us 25%, we're going to charge you 25%. And if we get to that parity, America will win. We're going to win that fight. But it's not been parity. And this is the really hard part. And I think, people got to give them a little time.
Right.
I mean, when you get India and Japan and South Korea and Vietnam saying, hey, we're all ready to deal, that's huge for us. That's a big win
I know.
for us.
And we got to just watch how rough we are with our allies. You've got to be rough. Don't do it publicly because they have egos and they have constituents too. Lastly, Mike, we only got 30 seconds, but what do you think of Kash Patel so far? You have that FBI background.
Yeah, listen, I think he's doing the right kinds of things. You have got to take the politics out. He's doing exactly that. If they can continue to focus on catching criminals in America, that's what the FBI is supposed to do. That's the FBI I joined, and that's the work I did. There's nobody better at it when it's functioning like that.
All right, so Mike, hopefully this is just one of many appearances as you try to get that Senate seat that just eluded you last time. Mike Rogers, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
All right, he is going to be running for the Republican seat to get the nomination and then try to become the Republican from Michigan. Don't move. You listen to the Brian Kilmeade Show.
But are you prepared for China to consider selling assets it holds in the United States? And do you want that to happen?
Well, remember, China's been selling off treasuries for some time. It's not a brand new development. The treasuries market will fluctuate. I'm not the Treasury Secretary, so I'm not the best poised to talk about that. But I think the issue is we've become so dependent on China, and for so many decades we haven't had fair market access. So again, we see China taking action, implementing their policy to try to be less tied up with us as well.
So that is the trade representative. And he's telling me, he's talking about what we're up against. And it looks like China is taking this personal. And it went from tariffs on everybody to tariffs just on China. And they decide to, that's Jamieson Greer, they decide to, number one, stop selling us rare earth. Number two, cut off sales of Boeing aircraft. Good luck with that. So you're basically Airbus or bust. And if you're in a rush, don't expect to get it right away. Sean Davis joins us now. He's CEO and co-founder of the Federalist, former economic policy advisor for Governor Rick Perry. Sean, what's your take on where we're at right now with China?
Well, I think we're at a little bit of a standstill right now. A lot of people are trying to analyze this as though negotiations have failed or this is the end. We're at the very beginning stages of a move to really do two things. One, we have to decouple from China. If we didn't learn that after COVID, we're nuts. But we have to decouple from China and have our own independence and not dependence on a foreign enemy of ours for key goods that we have. And then we also have to reindustrialize in America. They're two sides of the same coin. And so I think where we are now with China is we're trying to see who's going to blink first is we work to get decoupled from them and build back up our own manufacturing base so we don't have to depend on our enemies for key strategic goods.
But their actions are so aggressive, Sean. They said until we're not showing them respect, and they think our the tariff move by Trump is laughable and a joke, and they decide to amp up the aggression. Instead of just saying, okay, we're going to go over 100% tariffs, they do the two things I just mentioned. What do you read between the lines there? Do they want this fight? Have they been ready for this?
No, I kind of view that for people who are out there who are poker players, I view this as like a pretty early bluff from China. They know we have the stronger hand. They don't have the domestic capacity to support their economy. China cannot exist without everyone else buying their stuff. That's why China has such a massive trade surplus. They've got a weak hand here. We know they've got a weak hand. They know that we know they've got a weak hand. And I think they're engaged in some early on bluffing here to see if they can kind of maybe blink us off, maybe lead us to believe they're tougher and stronger than they are. It might have worked with another president. I don't think Trump's going to buy that, to be honest.
Well, he said, I'm open to talking. They say, no, not until you show us respect. And they have played their two best cards, I think. Outside invading Taiwan, when you go out and take rare earth from us, and that hurts electronics, hurts our military. The other thing, Sean, I cannot believe that we're still relying on them for rare earth and magnets and heavy metals. It makes no sense.
Well, I don't think we're totally dependent on them for rare earth minerals. We call them rare earth. We're talking about stuff like lithium and cobalt, which is generally used for the long-lasting batteries. They're not as rare as the name would lead you to believe. What we actually don't have is the capacity to kind of refine them into the form that we need. It's another major reason why we have to build up our industrial capacity here and reindustrialize, number one. Number two, it's also a good sign of why you shouldn't, as a nation, go all electric or try to go all electric, because you end up with these type of sticky supply chains where you're having to depend on people who don't like you to just be able to literally function as an economy. To me, that's nuts.
So I want you to hear what Ray Dalio says, respected investor, Bridgewater founder. Cut 18.
Do you think that these tariffs are being carried out in a practical way or a chaotic way?
I think we'll see. So far, very disruptive. Right? And so we don't know what the numbers are. But that could be part of a process, right? It depends where we are at the end of the 90 days. I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well.
Are you worried about something worse than a recession?
What I'm worried about is we end up 5 or 10 or 20 years from now with a complete inability to make anything we need to survive as a nation. Right now, we don't make our own medicines. We don't get our own rare earth materials.
That's next. Pharmaceuticals are next.
Exactly. Fertilizer. We don't make most of our own fertilizer. A lot of our food we don't make. Steel, most of which we don't make. These are core strategic national goods. And I would tell you, if let's say I had a farm, I owned a farm and I'm trying to be self-sufficient, but it turns out that I have to rely on everyone else around me, people who might actually hate me for all the things I need to run a farm, water, food, livestock, seed, fertilizer. I'm not going to last very long as a farmer. And what I think is much a bigger problem than, say, a short-term recession is us becoming eventually a vassal of the Chinese economy where we can't do anything without their permission. That, to me, is the worst-case scenario, not a recession that's a couple months.
So the Trump style is, instead of sitting in a think tank coming up with a policy, Trump style is, hey, welcome to Monday. The world trade, our relationship with the world when it comes to trade has changed forever. 10% across the board. China gets 25%. Fentanyl is 10% in Mexico as well as Canada. And then we're going to add that on to China because you do the precursors. So in traditional politics, things happen gradually. There's an announcement. maybe work through Congress. That's not the way Trump works. What do you think will work?
Well, I think if you look at traditional politics, that's what we've had for the last 50 plus years. It's traditional politics that have allowed China to build up its war machine, that's allowed China to go after our friends, to build up against Taiwan, using the money that we've given them through our economy, excuse me. So I think the time now is for untraditional politics. I think that's what Trump's doing. You know, we were all alive during the first administration. We saw how the economy was, how strong it was. I'm willing to give the guy a little leeway because again, 50, 60 years of politics as usual, that's what's gotten us in this position. So we need something different.
No, I hear you. And the thing that emerged for me, and I'm a non-economist. You're an economic expert. You're an advisor for Governor Perry, and this is where you thrive. But for me, I need someone to tell me what they're doing. And the guy I like to hear from is Scott Bessent. I don't like hearing from Peter Navarro, and I feel like Mark Lutnick is going for ratings rather than accuracy. So do you think you know what it's like behind closed doors with Trump? Your ex-boss was energy secretary. Do you think that message is brought over to Trump and saying, listen, step the other guys back, one voice, except for Trump, another voice is going to be Bessent, nothing else. It's just too much at stake.
Oh, I think the messaging could absolutely be better on this because there's so many moving parts. There's a lot of different equities going on. There is the reindustrialization. There's fixing the trade deals so they're not rigged. There's refinancing $9 trillion of our debt, which we really can't afford to do at 5 or 6%. So we'd like rates to go down in order to do that. That's actually one major reason why China keeps on dumping securities is they want to drive rates up because they know that's a pain point for us. I quite honestly don't understand what the Fed is actually doing, why they're not going and picking up the slack from all the treasuries that China's selling. They've had no problem doing that in the past.
Can you tell me what that means? What do you mean by picking up the slack with China selling?
So China's selling our bonds, trying to drive the rates up.
Got it.
All the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve. Thank you for clarifying that. The Federal Reserve should go in and just buy those up, pick up the slack that's being created by China dumping bonds into the market. But I do wish we had kind of a unified message, overall strategy coming from the president. Look, the guy's better at marketing and selling and sales than anyone else in that administration. There's people there who are very good at what they do, but nobody does the sales and the communication like Trump. So I wish he would be more clear about the overall strategy because I think it would give people more confidence that there is a plan underlying all of this.
So I want you to hear what Senator Kennedy said, kind of echoing what you said, cut 17.
I think I know what's in the president's heart, but I don't know what's in his head. The people you're talking about are right. The administration has not given one clear rationale for its tariffs. I think that's intentional. That I don't know, but my guess is it's intentional, and that it is part of the president's negotiating strategy. But Jake, I don't want to feign understanding here. I don't know. But that's my best guess, knowing how the president operates.
So, I mean, if the Republicans in the Senate and somebody like Kennedy, who a president likes a lot, doesn't know, you just got to think the communication could be better. Who could bridge that gap there? James Blair, maybe? Deputy Chief of Staff?
I think the only one who can do it is Trump himself. I mean, you need staff, you need advisors and cabinet people to go in and execute on your strategy. But nobody can sell stuff and explain stuff the way Trump can. You and I could sit back and even try to come up with what we think Trump might say, and it's not what he would say. He's just better at this than everyone else. So I think if he believes he needs to come out at some point and say this is the strategy, he should do it. But to Kennedy's question there, he said, I don't think there's one clear rationale. He's actually right, because there's not just one. You've got the interest rate issue with refinancing debt. You've got fixing trade deals, which were just bad. Those need to get fixed on principle. You've got decoupling from China, and then you've got reindustrializing America. That's 4 kind of fairly complicated things right there. It's not something that's easy to just go in and explain and rationalize in a couple sentences.
I hear you. And lastly, the big, beautiful bill. I mean, it's about over halfway there. From what you see, the framework on both sides, knowing they got to bridge the gap. What do you think that's going to do to the economy? Because people fear it's going to add to the debt, but people know that it could also turbocharge this whole thing and bring up the revenue side.
So I worked in Congress as a staffer for a long time, and I will just say I don't have very much confidence in the willingness or desire of Congress to cut much of anything. It's why we've gotten to the point where we have $40 trillion in debt. I think it's why DOGE has been so important, because Congress has just not expressed any desire to do what needs to be done on the cut side. So I very much hope they all prove me wrong for being a cynic here. I personally don't have a lot of confidence that Congress itself has what it takes to go and actually fix our fiscal situation, which is a problem because Congress really is the only one with the authority to do it.
What about the bill, from the makeup of the bill? Continuing the tax cuts from 2017, adding things like tax on tips, manipulating SALT a little bit, and taxes on Social Security, some of the other things that they want to bring up, spending up to $1 trillion in defense. Your thoughts?
It's hard to say, with these bills, especially this early in the process, we're in early April, it's like trying to pin Jell-O to a wall. So the principles all sound fine to me. There needs to be way more cutting. We need to be looking at taking away from the debt, not just chipping away at the deficit. So right now, I think the whole thing's a moving target. I want to wait to see what the actual final agreement is that comes out of a conference between the House and Senate before, deciding whether it's good or bad. They've got a long way to go. They've got a lot of work to do.
I'm leaning towards good. I have a good feeling for the framework, and I sense that Congress knows if they don't find a way to get a deal done, they're gonna lose both chambers in the midterms. Sean Davis, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.